Welcome to Reality Theory, episode 14. I'm your host, Casey Game McCalla, and today's episode is Al Sharpton, FBI and CIA agent provocateur. A lot of people know that Al was an informant. He said he informed on the mob. We're going to do a little deeper dive and talk about how he not only informed on the mob, but also black activists. And he also acted as a kind of agent provocateur his whole life, and it also seemed to have done some work with the CIA. So let's, without a further doubt, take a look at Al and what he might be doing with the CIA. And what would Al Sharpton be doing with the CIA? So we have right here a Twitter thread. In 1988, a column for the San Francisco Examiner, ex-Ramparts editor Warren Hinkle alleged that, according to his intelligence sources, Al Sharpton had been a CIA contract agent who was involved in destabilizing the Manley regime in Jamaica. Now, I wrote a book, Inside the CIA's Secret War in Jamaica, where I talk about all the things that the American CIA did to Jamaica to destabilize it and kind of overthrow the Manley regime. And these things included propaganda, economic sabotage, providing arms to the opposition, allowing the opposition to enrich themselves in the drug trade. I highly recommend everyone read my book, Inside the CIA's Secret War in Jamaica. Now, while Al Sharpton didn't come up in my research, Philip Agee, when he came to Jamaica, he would tell the Jamaicans to be on the lookout for like missionaries and religious figures who the CIA was using to manipulate the Jamaican population and economy and kind of get rid of the democratic socialist agenda that Michael Manley had. So again, Al was also not trying to capture black activists. He was on the heels of Assata Shakur. A couple of her friends would say that Al would come to meet with them with his big briefcase and he'd be recording them. And it was kind of clear that he was trying to find out her whereabouts for an ulterior motive. So this is Assata Shakur. A lot of people don't know her story or do know her story, but she was in jail and she was freed by fellow activists, and she actually made her way to Cuba where she was seen as a political prisoner. So Al Sharpton is trying to get black activists for the government while acting like he is a black activist opposing the government. I was also trying to get Mutulu Shakur. So Mutulu Shakur was Tupac's stepfather, and Al helped the government incarcerate him, and he actually just got out. So I'd love to hear what he has to say about Al. So about Al and Jamaica. So he's actually been going to Jamaica since he was 10, a little boy with his church with his mentor, Bishop F.D. Washington. He actually established a writing relationship with Marcus Garvey's widow. And from my book, I know that the CIA was very concerned with people like Marcus Garvey, his widow, his disciples, and keeping an eye on them, very concerned with the Rastafarian movement. We all know that J. Edgar Hoover personally hated Marcus Garvey, and his widow kind of carried on his legacy. So now J. Edgar Hoover's new informant, Al Sharpton, has struck up a relationship with his old enemy, which is very interesting. So Al did travel to Jamaica in 1974, which was the beginning of the Michael Manley regime. Michael Manley regime lasted from 1974 to 1980. Muhammad Ali came there with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. I actually have a picture of my grandfather in the crowd watching Muhammad Ali speak. So it's hard to find out what exactly Al was doing. I don't have Walter Hinkle's sources, but he was definitely in Jamaica in 1974. I talk about the Shower Posse in my book. They were kind of right-wing Jamaican Labor Party supported militia who were supported by the CIA to engage in kind of low-level guerrilla warfare with the PNP's supporting forces. So right now, here we have Al Sharpton all the way in the right. We have Siaga. So this is 1986. So this is around 6 years after the Manley regime, but he clearly maintained ties to Jamaica through boxing and Don King. And there we go. There's another picture of Al Sharpton with Muhammad Ali, Don King, and there is Michael Manley, the man who Walter Hinkle said he was sent to destabilize. So let's take a bigger look at Al Sharpton's kind of political career and also him being a rat. So Al has denied being a rat, denied being an FBI informant. Let's hear what he has to say.
Many of us are condemned for not fighting crime.
He's a crime fighter.
Now we're condemned for fighting crime. I was never told I was an informant with a number. So in my own mind, I was not an informant. I was cooperating with investigations. The conversations were recorded, and I would record them today if somebody threatened me.
So Al says he kind of volunteers. A lot of people don't believe that. People think Al became an informant because of this video.
You know, 99 for about 35,000 a kilo. But I gotta get, you know, more than one.
Right.
You know, I mean, if we're gonna do this thing,
no, you're talking about some real.
I mean, 10 kilograms is like it's 350,000. That's a drop in the bucket. You know, we can go bigger. Every kilogram we bring in 3,500 kilos. So that's not. So if we bring in 10, you make 35,000. But that's a chicken pocket.
No, he can. What he's going to do, he'll do what he wants to do.
They can do it, 100 times over. Might grow the supply 100 times over.
Now that video is.
So it seems here that Al is trying to be a broker for 100 kilogram deal of cocaine. Now that is a lot of cocaine, and Al Sharpton has always acted like he's been some sort of anti-drug crusader, but it looks like in 1984 he was a part of the kind of cocaine epidemic that was horrible in New York City. It led to the crack era. So here he is making a deal. So a lot of people believe that that video is what led him to being flipped. Now Al talked about being a kind of enemy to the mob, but according to Michael Franzese, he was a kind of mob associate. So Michael Franzese, former mob boss, and also Al Sharpton associate. So let's look what Michael Franzese has to say about Al Sharpton.
I was the one, he was the one that I took the plea with and ultimately got sentenced to for the 10-year sentence. So that's kind of my Henry Hill story. And now let's move on to Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton, I knew, again, back to the mid to the late 70s, the way I originally met him. And by the way, he was associated with other guys in my life. A guy in particular by the name of Danny Pagano, who was with another family, but he was a soldier in that family. And Al Sharpton used to answer to him. So I met Al because I was associated, my dad was associated with a company called Spring Records in the record business. Roy and Julie Rifkin were the two owners. And they used to engage Al Sharpton to bring them black talent to their record label. And they would actually pay him for it. He was kind of a gun for hire. Al, go out and get me some people, some of your black talent, bring it to the record company. If we sign them, we'll pay you for it. So that's how I originally met Al. And if you met Al back then, you wouldn't recognize him. He was pretty heavy set, used to wear warm-up suits, had long hair, gold chains around his neck. He was a character. I don't know how much of a reverend he was, but he was certainly a character. So we became friendly during that time. Two instances in particular with Reverend Al that I can talk about. One, I had a security guard union that was under my control. A guy by the name of Danny Cunningham operated that union, but it was under my control. Danny was with me. And we had a plan to unionize the security guards in Atlantic City. First, the restaurant and bartender workers, we were going to unionize them also, but the real serious play was with the security guards under Danny Cunningham. At that time, Nicky Scarfa, he had some influence in Atlantic City. I met up with Nicky. By the way, many of you have asked me about him. I know his reputation, pretty violent. He and I got along well. I like Nicky a lot. We met with him a couple of times and always got along great. So we were going to unionize them, and what we needed people to picket the hotels. So I go to Al. I said, Al, I need your help. You're going to round up some of your crew, and we're going to picket the hotels in Atlantic City so that we can get the security guards to unionize there. And I'm going to quote this. I don't want to be offensive, but I'm going to quote what Al Sharpton said to me, and you could take this to the bank. He said to me, Michael, you pay me good, and I'll have a few busloads of use the N word, there day and night picketing that building. That was Al Sharpton. He was a gun for hire. Yes, he used his people at that time to make money. That's what Al was all about back then, okay? I'm not going to comment on what he is today. He says he's transformed his life. In many ways, I see, some of the things that he did back then, he seems to be doing today. I'm going to leave it at that because I'm not involved with him anymore. Another situation.
All right. So Al tries to present himself as a kind of anti-mob crusader when it seemed he was a mob affiliate, like Sam Jackson and Goodfellas. The mob did have black affiliates. Also, we got here to talk about Al and his informing on Black leaders and Black politicians. So he doesn't really discuss this, but in his FBI files, it's clear that he was informing on Black activists Sonny Carson, Black politicians Wendell Foster, Major Owens, and Al Vann, and as well as his own friend Don King. So he's not just snitching on the mob, he's snitching on Black people, Black boxing promoters, Black politicians, Black activists. So let's take a look at what Al had to say about snitching back in 1988 when it first came out that he was an informant. New York Newsday asks him, when did you find out that Victor Quintana was an undercover agent? When reputed Colombo family figure Michael Francis got in trouble, it came in discovery that Quintana is an agent. That's when Quintana and the rest come to me and say that we are the FBI and we want to sit down and work with you on several things. I don't have a problem with saying that publicly. I will work with anyone against what I feel is criminal activity. Prior to this, Victor Quintana offered me, and I will bring you to Rudolph Giuliani to prove this. He offered me a drug deal. So we just saw the drug deal. It did not look like Al was fighting drugs. It looked like Al was being a willing conduit for being drugs to plague, I'm guessing, the Black community. I don't know, maybe he was bringing them to Hollywood or Beverly Hills, but I'm guessing he was helping someone, one of his big drug dealer friends, get cocaine for the Black community. So I don't know. New York Newsday says, and this was Quintana's apartment? No, this was at his office. Before Francis got in trouble, before Francis gets in trouble, then he says to me, can you introduce me to someone in drugs? And I say, I don't know nobody who does drugs. I think it's the worst thing that happens in a Black community. Well, there's this guy I know and I'd like you to meet him. So that's a big change. So clearly on the video, it didn't say anything about Al saying drugs is a scourge to the Black community. He doesn't know anyone who has drugs. He seems to be pretty confident that he knows people to move that way. So I don't know. I think he's being a little dishonest in this. We finagled around this guy he thought I knew didn't exist. We finagled around for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I started talking to him. Then, you know, a month or two later, this thing comes up. Now, one of these agents comes in and says, we got you on tape about drugs. Was this Joe Spinelli? No, it was the other guy. He said to me that they got you on tape taking drugs. I don't know if they were bluffing. And to be honest with you, he wrote down how much money I could make. All this crap, they claim that they have all this on tape. And I said, if you do, you got an entrapment. I never agreed to do anything like this. I told them to indict me. Then the guy comes back after I take this business and he says, listen, you said that you would work as long as there was something wrong. What are you willing to work for? This is not how the FBI works. They do not give you an option on who you want to snitch on. They tell you, we have you for this, and you're going to go to jail for this unless you snitch on this guy. So Al seems to be making up a little bit of creative writing. Then they say, well, we're trying to do some situations on boxing promoter Don King and Francisi, we saw previously. And I say, well, I think if one look at me, you can tell that I'm not Italian. I don't know how much mafia I can give you. They say, well, you know guys who are mafia. I say, you will have to tell me who they are. I say, let me explain something to you. The problem with the entertainment world is that I represent a lot of Blacks at the bottom, and these mobsters have used us. I will work with you. I don't mind telling you that I volunteered to work for them. So he's taking a different position than Michael Francis. And Michael Francis came to the position that Al was helping the mafia exploit Black artists in the music business. And Al is saying, and taking up payment for it, and Al is saying he was out there to represent Black artists and help them not get ripped off for the mob he's working for. Okay. After a week or two, they rested on that about King. Then they said, let's deal with the mob side. And I said, what do we want to do on the mob side? And we went through a litany of mobsters that have been using contracts, have been doing things like intimidating Blacks. So he's making a big Black thing. Like, these are old mob's friends, and he's making it seem like he's being a Black activist by snitching on the mob, his friends. Okay. And they got lucky in the middle of this. This is 1984. I'm threatening to boycott the Michael Jackson tour, and one of these mobsters threatened to kill me. Who is this? His name is Saul Porcillo. So right away, I say, if you guys want something, I got a guy who wants to kill me. I certainly would love to give this guy up. They get a guy to send up a meeting with me and let me be threatened. And if he would threaten me on behalf of the biggest record presidents in the world, were you wired? It's in a brown vase. So then they go through the litany agent. Another guy's name you recognize because he's under investigation right now, the booking agent, Norby Waters. Norby Waters was another Jewish mafia associate of the Italian mafia who worked in the music business. And Al did also snitch on him. So Al is the rainbow coalition of snitching. He snitches on the mafia. He snitches on Black people. He snitches on Jewish people. Everybody. Norby Waters was the guy that was illegally signing kids out of college. Yes, it was Black kids. And I was saying, this is something I can help you with. The guy's exploring and going through his song and dance. They couldn't get away. They wanted him or they didn't. Then they go to King again with reputed Genovese crime family member Danny Pagano. Remember, Danny Pagano was the man who Michael Francis said was like Al Sharpton's boss, who was a guy at a record company who I knew. So he's admitting he knows him. One of my guys worked for him, and that guy, I would get information. I say, well, is he doing anything that will hurt any of us? This is where I met FBI agent John Pitchard. They say Pagano might be scalping Black artist tickets, and they set up a sting for some guys in Jersey that were working for him. This guy in Jersey wants some tickets for me. Then about 6 months later, I went to meet with the Eastern District. So he's meeting with the Eastern District. So not only snitching for the FBI, he is snitching for New York City. So he's snitching for the same cops that he's been protesting for all his life, pretty much. So he talks about snitching to Andrew Maloney, talks about snitching to the New York Organized Crime Task Force. And then he talks about these kind of Black politicians. So he goes up here. Yes, but Pritchard's office did not know. I went to Maloney's office. This is a whole different thing. I was dealing with Maloney's office with elections, drugs, and something else. The elections were Brooklyn elections, and this is some stuff that I can prove that there is a ring that involves our politicians, Al Van, Major Owens, misusing 2,000 votes. I felt Maloney was the route to go. Major Owens was talking about. So he's snitching on Black politicians. I don't know if this is true. I don't know if they offered him a bribe. Could be not sure. So, but it's kind of just fictitious for Al to say he was just snitching on the mob. He was very involved in snitching on Black activists and politicians. Then Sharpton goes on. Butch Lewis introduced Quintana all over boxing. He introduced him to Bob Lee, who's now at IBM, but who was on the Jersey Boxing Commission at the time. I'm not saying Butch was working for him, right? But when you called Butch last week asking about me, he called me a half hour later. He called me, he said, man, they trying to create something. You know how white folks are. Butch hasn't called me since then. And Don fell out and me and Butch had an argument. I said, what you talking about, Butch? So then the next day when I talked to him, I said, you know something, Butch? If someone tries to distort what I'm doing, you're the guy that told me Quintana and these guys were all right. I know you brought them to the bar, and I know in fact that you've been to Francise's house. Then to say, yeah, brother, they can't let us split us. I mean, I have nothing to hide. So also, he gives them information on drug dealers. So this is my little thesis. So he said he had a man who could move the drugs for him. I believe this man was Donnie Smallwood. Donnie Smallwood was a big-time drug dealer out of Brownsville, same place Al Sharpton was from. So Al is now again snitching on his drug connect, Donnie Smallwood, talking about he gave him up. So that's Al, just really had to get rid of the myth that he was just snitching on the mob. So now let's look at what Al was doing as a kind of agent provocateur. So throughout the 80s, Al would get involved in all these kind of racially driven conflicts where there would be Yusef Hawkins and Bensonhurst, or incidents in Howard Beach where he gets stabbed, but he would take racial incidents and he would go and protest them, make them about him, and pretty much cause racial tension, never try and cause any resolution, with this kind of vague notion of justice for whatever. Now, when I was reviewing the COINTEL profile on Fred Hampton, the FBI wants Black racism. What they really feared for a Black Messiah was someone like Fred Hampton or Martin Luther King who could unite Black or white people. So that's why they're throwing their back behind an agent provocateur like Al Sharpton, because he's dividing Black people and white people. And it's working class white people and Black people. He's not taking Black people against the corporations or the CIA or you know, the politicians. He's pitting them against working class communities like Bensonhurst and Howard Beach. But really was the horrible thing that Al did was in Crown Heights. That's where I lived for about 10 years, a nice neighborhood. And it's a neighborhood with a lot of Caribbeans and also a lot of Hasidic Jewish people. And for much of what I saw, there was, you know, a little bit of ethnic tension. There was some racism on the part of the Hasidic Jews and some anti-Semitism on the part of the Caribbean blacks. But they also do get along very well. There's an artist named Mattis Yahoo who sings reggae. He's a Hasidic Jew who sings reggae. But what Al did in Crown Heights inflamed a lot of tension. So there was an incident, was an accident where a black child got hit by a car. Black child got hit by a car. Al made this an extremely racial incident. He said it wasn't an accident. He said they intentionally tried to kill this black child, which there's no evidence to kind of back that up. He would call them Jewish people bloodsuckers, Jew bastards, and he would say, if the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house. So Sharpton was actually so bad and anti-Semitic that his future MSNBC co-worker and friend Joe Scarborough would introduce a bill to Congress to condemn Al Sharpton's racism and anti-Semitism. And it says, whereas Congress strongly rejects the racist and incendiary actions of the Reverend Al Sharpton, whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has referred to members of the Jewish faith as blood-sucking Jews and Jew bastards, whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton has referred to members of the Jewish faith as white interlopers and diamond merchants, whereas the Reverend Al Sharpton was found guilty of defamation by a jury in a New York court arising from the false accusation of former Assistant District Attorney Stephen Magonis, who is white, raped and assaulted a 15-year-old black girl. So this is about the Tawana Briley case, which is a bad case. It's kind of like the original Jussie Smollett case, and unfortunately, it did a lot to undermine the credibility of black victims because, you know, we're taught to believe all women, believe all black people. But in this case, Al found the one black person, the one woman who was actually lying, and according to his advisors, he knew she was lying, but he knew he could make a big deal out of the case, become a media sensation. And I think his own words was, if we beat this, we'll be the biggest N-words in NYC. So again, let's go on to see what Joe Scarborough had to say about his future friend and co-worker, Al Sharpton. Whereas to this day, Al Sharpton has refused to accept responsibility and expresses no regret for defaming Pagonis. No. But and it's really weird that he's gotten so much media attention after that. You think most black activists, any activists who throw their weight behind a lie, a false case, they'd be banned from the media. You never see them from again. But nope, Al actually skyrocketed in the media after the Tawana Briley case. So there was another incident of anti-Semitism. This time in 1994, there was a dispute between a Jewish landlord and an African tenant, and Al again started really making it a big racial anti-Semitic thing. There were all sorts of horrible signs for these protests that he was leading. And after all his anti-Semitic rhetoric, the place was burned down. The Jewish landlord's house was burned down, and 5 innocent people were killed. So that's Al for you. I'm not going to blame him for that, but a lot of other people have, especially the Jewish community, for his rhetoric. Now, you'd think a lot of people will be canceled for their anti-Semitism forever. We've seen what happened to Kanye West and Kyrie Irving, but Al Sharpton is bulletproof. He can lie, he can be anti-Semitic, he can steal, he can be an FBI informant, and he will still be on your MSNBC every day. That's my word. So they talk about the Crown Heights incident, where he's the Rev Sean led a protest in Crown Heights and marched next to a protester with a sign that said the white man is the devil. Reverend Al Sharpton has practiced the politics of racial division and made inflammatory remarks against whites. Okay. So now let's take a look. Who is Al Sharpton's mentor? It is Jesse Jackson. Once again, like I said before, Jesse Jackson is definitely an FBI informant. So if your mentor is an FBI informant, what does that kind of make you? So Jesse met Al when Al was, I think, a teenager, 18, 19, and he made him the head of Operation Breadbasket NYC. Those who watched my episode on Jesse Jackson destroying the LSD gang alliance knows that that Jesse was using Operation Breadbasket to kind of break up the progress that Fred Hampton had made in terms of uniting the gangs in Chicago with the political activist groups. After Jesse came, he kind of destroyed that through his employees at Operation Breadbasket. Now, what's very interesting is that Al actually becomes Judas to Jesse's Judas. So he's a Judas of Judas. He betrays his own betrayer, much in the way of the fact that Jesse Jackson betrayed Martin Luther King. Al Sharpton would betray Jesse Jackson. So around 2000, there would be a new, well, I'd like to say, changing of the guard. Jesse Jackson was on his way out. Al Sharpton was on his way in, and Al Sharpton allegedly leaked to the media the news of Jesse Jackson's love child, which was a kind of big scandal that kind of pushed him out of the way. Al knew about it, leaked it to the media, and then when Al was on TV, they asked him about the Tawana Brawley case, and he says, "I think the Brawley case pales in comparison. Did I take the blood of the guy I loved and put it on my shirt? Let's talk about the people we're getting behind." So this is in reference to Jesse Jackson wiping the blood, which he did. He wiped the blood of Martin Luther King on his shirt so it could look like he was with him when he was in there. And this is a kind of symbolic moment of Jesse trying to, not only being an informant involved in the assassination of MLK, but trying to become the new MLK, the new Black Messiah. And for a lot of people, this is one of the reasons we kind of point to show that Jesse Jackson was involved in the assassination of MLK, his actions after it. Also, you know, the allegations that from William Pepper that he was definitely an FBI informant. William Pepper wrote definitive books on the MLK assassination. It was actually the lawyer who got the government to lose the case on the MLK assassination and had a jury prove that it was a conspiracy and that the government was most likely behind it. So that's Al. And after 2000, he takes on Jesse's role. Now, Jesse had been a kind of like international diplomat under the guise of being an oppressed African-American. He could go to Cuba and other third world countries and they would take him serious. Now, Al takes the role. So he actually started doing it before. So here is Al in Rwanda. Al traveled to Rwanda in 1994 after the Rwandan genocide, which has been kind of manipulated. But Al was actually there under the backing of the Rwandan Patriotic Front. What is Al Sharpton doing in Rwanda in 1994, the same year he's doing all these anti-Semitic protests? What makes him qualified to go to Rwanda? I don't know. Why does he have the backing of the CIA's Rwandan Patriotic Front? I don't know, but I could guess. It seems like Al is a CIA agent and they're using him and his public figure to get into third world countries where they have an interest in. So this isn't the only third world country he went to. He also went to the Sudan. And in 2003, he travels to Liberia with Tucker Carlson, Cornel West, and the Nation of Islam. All right. Now, Tucker Carlson wrote a whole story about it for Esquire magazine. And he would say that Sharpton would meet with Liberian dictator Charles Taylor, was a CIA agent, and he was also being briefed by Colin Powell and the State Department. So this doesn't seem like things that a presidential candidate would do. These seems like things a CIA agent would do. So he's all over Africa. He also even went to Cuba, tried to meet with Fidel Castro to bring hip hop to Cuba. And a lot of people see this now as Al Sharpton trying to bring hip hop to Cuba to kind of destabilize Cuba. So now 2004, Al runs for president. A lot of people don't know that Al's main financial backer and campaign advisor was Roger Stone. Same person was Trump's financial backer. Same person who goes on Alex Jones. Same person from January 6th. Same person who is the devil to a lot of this kind of leftists who now worship Al Sharpton. Now, why was Roger Stone managing Al Sharpton's campaign? This was before Roger Stone became a Trump guy. He was actually a pretty big Bush guy. He helped George H.W. Bush win in 2000 by the Brooks Brothers riots in Florida. So he's a dirty trickster political activist. And what a lot of people were saying that he was using Al Sharpton to sabotage the Democratic Party. There was really only one progressive candidate in 2004, and that was Howard Dean. And Al Sharpton was used to kind of take out Howard Dean, and they used to kind of yell. So it seems like Al is a political ploy. Roger Stone is a super dirty deep state guy. Allegedly, he's not with the deep state now. Now he's with Trump. I don't believe him. So less is more. So I'm not going to go on too much. So that's Al Sharpton for you. We kind of see his history. It's pretty clear he's an Agent Provocateur, not just an FBI informant. He's not just relaying information for the FBI, but he's acting, he's causing tension. So if you go back and you read all the COINTELPRO files, Operation Chaos, you will see that the FBI wants to cause division in the Black community, which Al has done, and also promote Black racism to prevent a multiracial coalition that could really rise up against the powers that be. So that's episode 14. Please, if you made it this far, like, subscribe, comment, share, post my videos on Reddit, post them on Facebook, post them on Twitter. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to bring a lot of necessary information. Thanks for sticking with me. This is Casey Gay McCallum, Reality Theory, episode 14.